In 1914, Europe was a continent of empires, armies, and uneasy alliances. It looked powerful. It was also dangerously fragile. A single gunshot in Sarajevo did not just kill Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It detonated a world order already packed with suspicion, rivalry, and fear. Within weeks, a regional crisis became the First World War, and the modern era was changed forever. To understand why, you have to look beneath the spark. Nationalism was rising across Europe, convincing people that their nation's honor mattered above all else. Militarism gave governments confidence that armies could solve problems, and that larger armies meant greater security. Imperial rivalry added pressure overseas, as great powers competed for colonies, trade routes, and prestige. Then there were the alliances. They were meant to prevent war. Instead, they made escalation faster, because every promise of support pulled another country closer to the edge. The July crisis after the Sarajevo assassination turned tension into action. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Germany backed Austria-Hungary. Russia moved to protect Serbia. France was tied to Russia. Britain watched German pressure on Belgium and the balance of power on the continent. Mobilizations began. Declarations followed. The chain reaction had started, and once it began, no leader could easily stop it. At first, many people believed the war would be short. Governments expected quick victories, bold offensives, and a return to normal life by Christmas. Germany's plan depended on a rapid drive through Belgium and into France, aiming to knock France out before Russia could fully mobilize. But war on this scale moved faster than diplomacy, and more slowly than the planners imagined. The Battle of the Marne in September 1914 stopped the German advance. That moment mattered. It ended the fantasy of a quick war and opened the door to a long, punishing struggle. On the Western Front, the battlefield soon hardened into trench lines stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. This was not a single trench, but an enormous system of defenses: wire, dugouts, artillery positions, and supply routes. Between the lines lay no man's land, a space shaped by shell craters, mud, and death. Soldiers lived for days, weeks, and months in cramped conditions. They endured rain, lice, rats, disease, exhaustion, and constant fear. The war was not only a series of attacks, it was also long stretches of waiting. And then, in an instant, it could end in a mass assault that gained only yards. That stalemate produced battles like Verdun and the Somme, where commanders tried to break the deadlock with overwhelming firepower. Instead, the fighting consumed whole armies. Verdun became a symbol of endurance. The Somme became a symbol of loss. Hundreds of thousands were killed, wounded, or missing for gains measured in miles. The war no longer looked like a contest of maneuver. It looked like a contest of exhaustion, where victory meant surviving longer than the enemy. World War I became the first truly industrialized war, because factories, railroads, and mass armies all fed the battlefield. Machine guns cut down attacking troops with terrifying efficiency. Heavy artillery killed from miles away. Barbed wire slowed movement and trapped men in exposed ground. Rail networks moved soldiers and shells with unprecedented speed. The result was a new kind of slaughter, one where technology favored defense and transformed battlefields into machines of attrition. World War I was fought with 20th century technology, but often with 19th century tactics. The human cost was catastrophic, and the weapons kept changing. Poison gas introduced panic, injury, and terror on a massive scale. Tanks appeared as a desperate attempt to break through trench deadlock. Aircraft, first used for scouting, became fighters and bombers. Submarines turned the seas into another battlefield, threatening merchant shipping far from the trenches. Every new invention promised an advantage. Every advantage was answered. The war became a laboratory for modern warfare, and the lessons were learned at enormous cost. The Eastern Front was different. It was more mobile, with huge advances and retreats across vast distances. Cities, villages, and rail lines changed hands. Armies and civilians were displaced on a massive scale. The front exposed the weaknesses of the Russian Empire, where military losses, food shortages, and political unrest deepened one another. By 1917, pressure from war helped push Russia into revolution. One empire was already beginning to collapse. By 1916 and 1917, exhaustion spread everywhere. Food was short, governments borrowed heavily, morale weakened, workers struck. Soldiers muttered about mutiny. Even victory felt distant. The war was now testing political systems as much as military ones, and that pressure helped destabilize governments from Berlin to Petrograd. It was becoming clear that the battlefield and the home front could not be separated. Each fed the other, and each made the crisis deeper. As the war dragged on, it became total war. Entire societies were mobilized, not just armies. Governments directed industry, controlled supplies, and rationed food and fuel. Women worked in factories, farms, transport, and offices to keep the war effort going. Propaganda encouraged endurance. Censorship limited dissent. Blockades created hunger and hardship. The home front was no longer safely separated from the battlefield. It was part of the battlefield. In a war like this, civilians were not bystanders. They were participants, targets, and victims. The war also spread far beyond Europe. Because the great powers controlled empires, soldiers and laborers came from Africa, the Middle East, Asia, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and elsewhere. Colonial troops fought and died in Europe and beyond. Resources were drawn from across the world. Naval blockades, convoy routes, and campaigns in the Ottoman Empire and other regions widened the conflict. What began as a European crisis had become a global war. The oceans, deserts, and colonies all became part of the struggle. In 1917, the balance shifted again. The United States entered the war in April, bringing fresh industrial strength, loans, and eventually large numbers of troops. American forces did not arrive all at once, but their presence mattered. At the same time, Russia was leaving the war after revolution and collapse. For the Allies, American manpower and production helped replace what Russia was losing. By 1918, the battlefield was exhausted, but the war was not over yet. The final year brought huge offensives, desperate defenses, and staggering losses. Germany launched one last major push in the spring of 1918, hoping to win before American power fully arrived. The attack gained ground, but not victory. The Allies countered in what became known as the 100 Days Offensive. Step by step, the German armies were pushed back. At 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918, the guns fell silent. The armistice did not erase the damage, but it ended the fighting. For millions, that silence was a relief beyond words. Yet peace did not mean a return to the old world. Around 16 million people, military and civilian, had died. 4 empires had collapsed: the German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian. New borders appeared, new states emerged, old grievances survived. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919 aimed to settle the conflict, but it also imposed blame, penalties, and contested borders that would echo for decades. The First World War had transformed nations, societies, and expectations of war itself. It showed that modern conflict could engulf entire continents and reshape the century. Which consequence of World War I most directly led to World War II?